The late afternoon sun cast long, stretching shadows across the quiet streets near the corner store where I worked part-time. I had always found comfort in the predictability of my shifts. Stocking shelves, managing the register, the rhythm of mundane tasks, providing a steadying counterpoint to the turbulence of my thoughts. But that day, the usual patterns seemed fragile, as though some invisible current had begun to ripple beneath the surface, hinting at danger I could not yet perceive. The bell above the door jingled repeatedly as students wandered in, chatting about classes, gossip, and weekend plans. I moved mechanically, arranging snacks, refilling shelves, my mind preoccupied with thoughts of Luigi. Every glance out the window, every familiar face, carried a weight, a potential connection to the fragile thread of tension that had been building these past weeks. It was near the end of my shift, when the late light turned the aisles a warm golden, that I noticed a figure lingering outside the store. At first, I thought it was just a student waiting for a friend or someone passing by. But there was something off. A furtive glance, a subtle shift in posture, the careful concealment of his hands in the pockets of a hooded jacket. My pulse quickened, an instinctive unease settling in my chest. I tried to shake it off, returning to the shelves, but my attention kept straying to the man. He seemed to be waiting for someone, or something. Then, without warning, a second figure appeared, moving swiftly, confidently, with a package held carefully under one arm. Their eyes met briefly, and I caught the unmistakable tension of a transaction, subtle and deliberate. I froze, heart hammering. This wasn't a typical street corner exchange. Something darker, more dangerous, was happening before my eyes. I ducked behind the shelves, pretending to organize products while keeping a careful watch. My instincts screamed at me to step back, to avoid involvement, yet a strange mixture of curiosity and fear compelled me to observe. The men exchanged a few words, low and hurried, their movements precise and controlled. Every subtle gesture spoke volumes. An exchange of power, a silent negotiation conducted without overt words. Then one of the men noticed me. Just a flicker, a subtle glance in my direction, but enough to make my stomach knot with dread. I ducked lower, trying to appear absorbed in my work, hoping I had gone unnoticed. But it was too late. The moment of observation, however brief, had drawn me into their world. I had seen too much, and now I was a variable they had not accounted for. Later that evening, I recounted the event to no one. The store was empty, the aisles quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. My hands shook as I stacked boxes, the ordinary tasks suddenly imbued with an unbearable weight. Each movement reminded me of what I had witnessed, the potential danger now lurking just beyond the mundane. I knew that this incident could not remain a private observation. Danger had touched my life, and its presence was no longer theoretical. I couldn't tell Heather. She would panic, perhaps overact, and more importantly, she had no idea how to navigate a world so alien, so morally ambiguous. And Luigi, I couldn't even begin to guess how he would react. Yet, I knew instinctively that he would be involved somehow. His presence in my life, his sense of awareness, his uncanny ability to act decisively in situations most would flee from, all pointed to the inevitability that Luigi would intervene. The following night, as I lay in bed, replaying every moment, I realized I could not sleep. My thoughts were relentless, circling back to the men, the package, the sudden awareness that my quiet world had shifted into something dangerous. Fear and curiosity mingled in equal measure, a potent cocktail that left me restless, tense, and strangely exhilarated. I thought of Luigi. How had he always seemed to appear just when I needed him? Did he know, in some inexplicable way, that I would find myself in peril? Or was it merely coincidence, a fortunate alignment of circumstances? Either way, the thought of him brought a small measure of comfort, even amid the anxiety. The next day, I saw him again, unexpectedly, near the corner of the store. He had that same quiet confidence, that effortless presence that seemed to shift the energy of a space simply by being in it. "Marco," he said softly, stepping closer, You look uneasy. Something happened yesterday. I hesitated. How could I explain it without revealing the dangerous reality I had glimpsed? I noticed something, I said cautiously. Something unusual. But I'm not sure what it means. Luigi's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of intensity crossing his features. Be specific, he said. What did you notice? I swallowed hard, voice barely audible. Men exchanging something quickly, and I think they saw me. For a moment, he was silent, eyes flicking toward the street, calculating, analyzing, the very image of control and composure. Then, he looked back at me, expression unreadable. You did the right thing by noticing, he said finally. But you're now involved, more than you realize. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight I could feel in my bones. My pulse quickened, my breath caught, and a strange mixture of fear and anticipation surged through me. Over the next few days, the unease persisted. I became hyper, aware of every street corner, every shadow, every passerby. The world felt suddenly dangerous, unpredictable, as if I had crossed an invisible threshold into a realm I had not known existed. And Luigi's presence, always reassuring, now carried an additional layer of complexity, the sense that he was the only anchor in a rapidly shifting reality. Heather, unaware of the danger, continued to press me for attention and clarity. Her questions, her concerns, her subtle observations became an additional pressure, a reminder that I was straddling two worlds, the mundane obligations of life, and the dark, thrilling unknown that had begun to seep into every corner of my existence. One evening, as I closed the store and prepared to leave, I noticed a figure lingering across the street. Hooded, cautious, watching. My stomach dropped. The sense of being observed was immediate and undeniable. I felt a thrill of fear, sharp and insistent. Before I could react, Luigi appeared beside me, as if materializing from the shadows. Stay calm, he whispered, eyes locked on the figure across the street. This is only the beginning. You need to trust me, and trust your instincts. There's no room for hesitation now. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The ordinary life I had known, the quiet rhythms, the predictable interactions, was gone. Something had begun, something dangerous, something that would pull us both into a world far beyond anything I had imagined. And in that moment, standing beside Luigi, I realized that everything was about to change. Our lives, our choices, our hearts. They would all be tested in ways I could not yet comprehend. The street felt alive in a way I had never experienced before, pulsing with tension, danger, and unpredictability. The hooded figure across from the store had not moved, yet the sense of being watched pressed heavily against me. I could feel every heartbeat, every twitch of muscle, as though my body had been wired to the rhythm of the city itself. Luigi's presence beside me was grounding, a counterweight to the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. He moved with a fluid, practiced precision, eyes scanning, calculating, a silent analysis of threats invisible to most. Stay behind me, he whispered, voice calm, authoritative, yet carrying an unspoken urgency. I obeyed, instinctively shrinking back, but unable to tear my gaze away from the unfolding scene. The hooded figure shifted subtly, adjusting the concealed package beneath his arm. My pulse quickened. I knew that package contained something dangerous, something that could upend lives. Then, from a side alley, another figure appeared, younger, hesitant, clearly nervous. The man with the package approached him, words low, terse, almost inaudible. The tension was palpable, and I realized with a jolt that the exchange was not merely an ordinary transaction. It was a drug deal. I froze, heart pounding. This was real, dangerous, criminal, and I, by mere chance, had witnessed it. The thought of reporting it seemed naïve. These people were professional, cautious, and aware. They had probably handled situations like this before, and now my presence complicated their plans. Luigi stepped slightly forward, a subtle shift that drew my attention. He did not reach for anything, did not make a move, yet his stance conveyed absolute readiness. I felt both reassured and terrified. How could one person wield such power through presence alone? The hooded man glanced my way again, suspicion flickering in his eyes. My stomach lurched. I had to act, yet any wrong move could trigger a confrontation far beyond my capability to handle. Luigi's hand brushed mine, a brief, almost imperceptible gesture, and I knew he had assessed the situation completely. "Move," he whispered. "Follow my lead, but stay silent." We stepped forward carefully, the sound of our feet muffled against the uneven pavement. The air seemed thicker, heavier, charged with the unspoken tension between what was visible and what remained hidden. The younger man, unaware of our observation, accepted the package with a mix of hesitation and urgency. His hands shook slightly as he secured the item, and I could see the fear in his eyes. He was inexperienced, naive, yet caught in a world far beyond his comprehension. Then, suddenly, a harsh voice cut through the silence. "What do you think you're doing?" The hooded man had noticed us. My heart skipped. Time seemed to stretch, elongated and distorted by adrenaline. The moment teetered on the edge of chaos. Luigi reacted instantly, a precise and fluid motion that left me momentarily breathless. He intercepted the younger man, guiding him behind a parked car with effortless authority. The hooded figure lunged, and Luigi met him with a calmness that defied the raw energy of the attack. I watched, paralyzed, as Luigi disarmed and subdued the threat with a combination of physical skill and psychological control. Every move was calculated, deliberate, and deadly in its efficiency, yet executed with restraint. The encounter lasted only moments, yet it seemed stretched into eternity in my mind. When it was over, the street returned to an eerie quiet. The younger man, wide-eyed and trembling, looked at Luigi as though he had encountered a guardian angel. "Fu, who are you?" he stammered. Luigi offered a faint smile, one that conveyed reassurance and command simultaneously. "Someone who wants to help. Now move, quickly, and disappear before anyone notices you." I followed silently, mind racing, heart pounding. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand everything at once, but the danger was still present, and Luigi's calm authority commanded patience. Once the figures disappeared, Luigi turned to me. "Marco," he said softly, "you did well by noticing. But this is bigger than you realize. And now, by witnessing it, you are connected." I swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. "Connected how?" I asked, voice trembling. "You were in the wrong place at the right time," he said. "And sometimes, those moments define everything. You will need to understand that decisions carry consequences, both seen and unseen." Later, as we walked back toward campus, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Shadows stretched across the pavement, mingling with the remnants of the day's tension. I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, every nerve on edge, my mind replaying the encounter in obsessive loops. "Luigi," I finally managed, voice low. Why did you do it? Why intervene?" He glanced at me, expression thoughtful, almost distant. "Because someone had to," he replied simply. "Because I can. Because it was right. And because if you had tried to intervene yourself, it could have ended badly. You weren't ready, Marco. Not yet." I felt a surge of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper, something I could not name. The intensity of his presence, the certainty in his actions, left me shaken yet inexplicably drawn. "Luigi, do you always have to be so calm?" I asked, half in awe, half in disbelief. He chuckled softly, a sound that somehow anchored me amid the chaos of my thoughts. "Calm comes from understanding," he said. "From knowing what is at stake and what is worth risking. Fear is natural, but it cannot control you. Not if you are aware, not if you act with purpose." That night, I could hardly sleep. The events of the afternoon replayed in my mind with vivid clarity. The exchange, the confrontation, Luigi's intervention, and beneath the fear and adrenaline, a subtle, unshackable fascination had taken root. Luigi was no longer just a friend, a presence in my life. He had become a catalyst, a force that challenged everything I thought I knew. Heather, of course, was completely unaware of the danger. Her own world, centered around jealousy and suspicion, seemed trivial compared to the dark currents that had begun to flow through my life. Yet I could not bring myself to worry about her in that moment. The gravity of reality, of real danger, was overwhelming. And so, I lay awake, mind racing, heart hammering, aware that nothing would ever be the same. The accidental discovery had pulled me into a world I had never imagined, a world of shadowed streets, dangerous figures, and moral choices that could shape the trajectory of my life. By the next morning, the reality of the situation pressed down with undeniable weight. The package, the exchange, the observation, it was not something I could forget or ignore. And deep down, I knew that Luigi would not let it go either. His sense of duty, his moral compass, and perhaps his own unspoken motives would ensure that this event was only the beginning of something far larger, far more dangerous, and far more consequential. As I walked toward the campus, every glance over my shoulder carried a shadow of doubt, a suspicion that someone might be following, watching, assessing. The ordinary world felt fragile, unstable, as if any moment could shatter the illusion of safety. And I realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that my life had irrevocably changed. Luigi had intervened, yes, but the forces we had touched, even briefly, would not simply vanish. Danger lingered, consequences waited, and the next steps, both for him and for me, would be fraught with risk, moral ambiguity, and decisions that could define us forever. The days that followed felt surreal, as though reality had shifted into a world I no longer fully recognized. Every familiar street corner, every ordinary routine, carried the latent possibility of danger. I walked to campus with a heightened awareness, senses sharpened by the memory of the previous encounter. The city, normally a comforting backdrop to my student life, now seemed layered with hidden threats, secrets, and unseen currents. Luigi was nowhere to be seen that afternoon. His absence weighed on me unexpectedly, leaving a hollow space that seemed to echo with unspoken possibilities. I kept replaying the rescue in my mind. His calm decisiveness, the way he had moved, the quiet authority that had subdued the criminals without unnecessary violence. The memory was mesmerizing, but it also carried a heavy burden, the realization that this world was far more complex, morally ambiguous, and dangerous than I had ever imagined. Heather tried to catch up with me after class, her bright expression betraying no understanding of the storm brewing beneath my composed exterior.
"Marco! You look distracted."
"Are you thinking about schoolwork or something else?" I forced a faint smile, nodding politely. Just schoolwork, Heather, nothing to worry about. But I knew she sensed something. She always did. Her sharp gaze, tinged with curiosity and subtle jealousy, lingered longer than necessary, probing for any sign of secrets I might be keeping. I wished I could tell her everything, but the truth was too dangerous. She couldn't know about the criminals, about the package, or about Luigi's involvement. That knowledge would put her in harm's way instantly. "Are you sure?" she pressed, tilting her head with that persistent curiosity that could be both endearing and irritating. "Wes, I'm sure," I said firmly, though my voice carried none of the certainty I wished it did. That evening, the world seemed heavier, quieter. Shadows clung to corners, streetlights cast long, distorted patterns on the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic sounded like an ominous undertone. I found myself walking the same streets where I had witnessed the transaction, drawn by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a strange compulsion I couldn't name. I paused outside the alley where Luigi had intervened, recalling the subtle shifts, the tension, the sudden, decisive action that had saved me from danger. My pulse quickened as I imagined the younger man scurrying away, terrified but unharmed, thanks to Luigi's presence. I realized, with a disquieting clarity, that I had entered a world where ordinary rules no longer applied, where observation, decision, and action carried consequences far beyond my understanding. And Luigi, he was at the center of it, guiding, controlling, and yet hiding something I could not fully grasp. The next encounter was unexpected, as all truly life-altering events tend to be. I was leaving the library, books in hand, when I saw him standing at the edge of the quad. Luigi's expression was unreadable, calm yet intense, and his presence immediately pulled me into a current of emotion I could barely comprehend. "Marco," he said softly, stepping closer. "We need to talk now." I followed him instinctively, heart racing, mind spinning. We found a quiet corner, away from the bustle of students, away from curious eyes. Luigi's gaze was steady, his voice deliberate. "The situation yesterday, it's more complicated than you realize. That exchange, the people involved, they're part of something bigger. And I've made a choice." My stomach tightened. "What choice?" I asked cautiously. "I've agreed to work with them," he said quietly. "Not in the way you think. Not as a criminal, but as someone who can navigate their world from the inside. It's the only way to ensure they don't harm innocent people, and to protect you." The words hit me like a shockwave. You're going undercover." "Wes," he said simply, as though stating a fact rather than confessing a profound moral decision. "It's dangerous, Marco. I won't lie about that. And it means I will have to disappear for a while. You may not hear from me. You may not know where I am or what I'm doing, but I promise I'm doing this to keep you and others safe." I felt a swirl of emotions: relief, fear, admiration, and something far deeper, more intimate. The thought of Luigi disappearing, leaving me behind in a world that suddenly seemed so fragile, was unbearable. And yet, I understood the necessity of his decision. He was always driven by a moral compass, a sense of justice that demanded action, even at personal cost. "Luigi, I don't know what to say," I murmured, struggling to articulate the complex mixture of longing, fear, and awe that threatened to overwhelm me. "Say nothing," he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. "Just understand that this is bigger than us, bigger than our friendship, maybe, even bigger than our feelings. I'll come back when the time is right. Until then, be careful. Trust your instincts. And Marco, don't do anything reckless." I nodded, though the knot in my chest refused to loosen. The reality of his words sank in gradually, like the slow descent of shadows across the city. Luigi would vanish into a world I could not follow, leaving me with only the memory of his presence and the knowledge that our lives had irrevocably changed. The days turned into a blur. Campus life continued its usual rhythm: classes, exams, social interactions. But beneath the surface, my mind was occupied with thoughts of Luigi. Every encounter, every passing stranger, carried a faint echo of the danger he had described. I felt simultaneously empowered and paralyzed, aware of my own limitations, yet drawn irresistibly toward the unfolding mystery. Heather's presence became increasingly complicated. She noticed my distraction, my preoccupation, and her questions became sharper, more insistent. "Marco, seriously, what's going on? You're not yourself. Are you hiding something from me?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "Nothing, Heather. Really. I have a lot on my mind with school, that's all." Her eyes lingered on me, a mixture of suspicion and hurt, but she said nothing more. The tension between us grew, unspoken yet palpable, another layer complicating an already fragile reality. One night, as I sat by my window, staring at the city lights, I realized that Luigi's decision had irrevocably changed the trajectory of my life. The ordinary world I had known, the predictable routines, the safe spaces, the relative innocence of student life, was gone. In its place was a realm of danger, moral ambiguity, and unspoken truths. And through it all, Luigi remained a constant presence, even in absence. His choices, his courage, his willingness to navigate a perilous world for the sake of others. These qualities had left an indelible mark on me. I understood, finally, that the bond between us was no longer just friendship. It was something deeper, something that transcended conventional definitions, anchored in trust, admiration, and an unspoken understanding of shared danger. As the night deepened, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The events of that day were only the beginning. Luigi's choice to go undercover, the shadows he had stepped into, and the dangers that now loomed over both of us would shape the months, perhaps years, to come. And I, whether ready or not, would be drawn into the unfolding story, forever changed by the man who had become both protector and enigma in my life.